Where'd you go? Hang on a second. Share screen. There we go. Happy Tuesday. It's a happy hour of sorts. Today, I'm going to talk about menopause and spot reduction. We've been hearing about spot reduction probably since 17 magazine, right? Goes that far back, which is actually a little scary. Just goes to show you what the media portrays for women. So this is typically what a problem area that women will complain about. The other one is their stomach, their thighs, their butt. Although more recently, not butt. It's actually en vogue to have a nice round booty. But the arms, the bat wings, the tummy, the thighs, all the things are things that we don't necessarily enjoy about ourselves. And there is a misconception that you can actually point to a specific area of your body and get thinner, lean it out. Right? So what's the question? Can we lose fat in specific areas of our body by focusing your exercises or your diet on those areas? Do countless sit-ups, bicep curls, leg exercises, whatever it might be, actually help us slim down? This is just a picture of what fat looks like. So on the far left, you can see the pen. That is actually 5 pounds of fat. And then right next to it, you can see the 1 pound of fat. And right next to that, you can see the 1 pound of muscle. Keep this picture in mind in upcoming slides. So what is fat actually? There's 2 different types of fat. You have subcutaneous fat. That's the kind of fat that you can pinch. It's really on the surface. It's not going to affect our health too greatly unless there's a lot of it. Then we have what's called visceral fat. The visceral fat is the organ that is really surrounding your organs. That type of fat, if it's really in excess, can be linked to diseases such as heart disease, cognitive issues, blood pressure issues, diabetes, and even cancer. How do you gain visceral fat? Eating more calories than you're burning, of course. Being exposed to chronic stress. Chronic stress increases the amount of cortisol, which tends to create abdominal fat. Cortisol is a hormone, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Sleep disturbances can also affect your hunger and satiety hormones, which can cause you to eat in excess. And I've mentioned this before, generally what we're eating is going to be something less than nutrient dense. And then as we are approaching midlife, perimenopause, menopause, we are not producing as much estrogen, and estrogen is a protector of our heart, does a lot of things, but it's also a hormone that plays a role in helping us, or unfortunately causing us, to store that deep belly fat. Okay. We don't want to advance. So how does fat loss work? Fat is basically stored energy. When you exercise, your body doesn't just burn fat from a targeted area. Exercise draws energy from fat stores throughout your whole body. And it doesn't just draw fat, but it can potentially utilize carbohydrates, and it can potentially utilize proteins found in your muscle store. Little beyond the scope of this conversation, but it's especially important to make sure that if you're exercising for extended periods of time, that you are replenishing with carbohydrates that your body can use for energy. Otherwise, it's going to take it from places, unfortunately, like your muscle. It'll search for that protein. Genetics and hormones have a role in our fat and our body composition. Definitely can genetically impact where we store our body and where we lose it from. I'm sure anybody on here that has gained or lost weight can tell where it goes on and comes off first. For me, it was always my boobs. Always lost the weight from my boobs. Last place to go is always where you want it to go, right? And everybody loses fat differently, and it's certainly not possible to control which areas lose fat first. So let's talk about hormones and our body composition. So what hormones are affecting our body composition? Again, I mentioned cortisol a little bit. Chronic stress can increase cortisol, and that can cause increased fat storage in your abdominal area. And specifically that visceral fat, that's the more dangerous fat. You want to try to make sure that you are managing stress through mindfulness techniques, making sure you're getting sleep, and utilizing different relaxation techniques as well. Stress is a part of life, something we can't avoid, but we can learn how to manage it better. Insulin. So our body responds differently, or can tend to respond differently as we are aging. But the balancing of blood sugar levels is what insulin is responsible for. We want to try to maintain a diet that's low in refined sugars and high in fiber. And you should look up the glycemic index of carbohydrates, especially, or foods. If you have a tendency to be insulin resistant, you might want to pursue a lower glycemic index nutrition plan. Higher glycemic index items are great for things like endurance events, when you know you're going to be out there for more than 90 minutes and you're going to need that energy pretty quickly. Then you're going to want to have something that has a higher glycemic index. And then leptin and ghrelin are newer hormones that have been discovered, I believe, in the mid-1990s, so fairly recent. And they can be affected by poor sleep, and they influence our hunger and satiety use. So, just going to mute you, Melissa. So if we are getting poor sleep, we may not be able to, our bodies may not be able to tell us, oh, you're not hungry anymore, or you're not full. So those hormones are impacted. And also poor sleep is going to impact your recovery and muscle repair. Estrogen, talk a lot about that. As we are entering perimenopause, menopause, those hormones are really in a state of flux, but estrogen is a key regulator of fat. A pre-menopausal woman, not perimenopausal, but even before the process, on average has 5 to 8% visceral fat. A menopausal female then jumps up to 15 to 20% visceral fat. Can HRT help? Some research does show positive results with regard to visceral fat. If you're on an MHT, HRT, whatever you want to call it. However, when HRT is stopped, the impact of those results can also disappear, but it's something that you might consider. Other considerations as we are aging, as far as our body composition is concerned. Sarcopenia, if you've not heard of that, is when you are losing lean mass or muscle tissue. There is a degree, everybody's going to start to lose muscle mass, but sarcopenia is really when it's more of an advanced state. And it really puts us at an increased risk of falls, and fractures can certainly impact overall quality of life because you're basically losing muscle and therefore losing strength and really mobility as well. Can be impacted by loss of estrogen, increase in inflammation within your body, insulin resistance, just aging in general, and then poor metabolic health. On building muscle, yes, you can build and strengthen muscles in specific areas through targeted exercises or targeted training. Muscle for sure can be built in specific areas, unlike fat being broken down in specific areas. It does not necessarily reduce the fat covering those muscles, but putting on muscle, which is a more metabolic material, can help you burn more calories in general. So keeping that in mind, building muscle is not only good for your metabolic processes, but it's also going to help with the preventing the loss of muscle. And also, think about those, the falls, the ability to like catch your balance, to prevent falls, and therefore prevent fractures. So muscle's important. How do you know if you're at risk? So I used to have an InBody scale in my gym. It's a medical grade body composition scale. It can tell you exactly how much water, how much muscle, how much bone, how much fat is within your body. And it can also specifically attempt to measure your visceral fat. So it's the closest thing that you're going to be able to get to really analyzing what you're made of, along with a DEXA scan, which is also a little more in depth to your bone health and your bone measurements. And if you just wanted to do a quick test to find what your risk is at home, you didn't want to have to deal with that. Actually, if you do want to get a body composition analysis on an InBody machine, if you go to InBody, I think it's InBody.com, you can find locations. So I used to have my location listed that I had an InBody machine. I think I used to charge like $25 for non-clients to do the scan. A lot of times nutrition stores will have them in-house, and then, they're just hoping you walk in there and buy some products. Nutrition offices, probably functional medicine doctors might have them. DEXA scans, talk to your doctor about that. There are portable medical vans that are starting to go around. Actually, I got a request to see if I wanted to go work for them to do these scans for people in parking lots. So you can look for those too. I forget the name of the machine, but you can always ask if you're interested in that, and I can look it up. Waist to hip ratio is definitely the easiest. You can get somebody to measure for you. Just get a soft measuring cloth, take your waist circumference, which is going to be the smallest part of your waist. Generally, it's like right above your belly button. And then have someone take your widest part of your hips. So stand with your feet together, but body relaxed, and have somebody come to the side. And I always used to take the largest portion of the person's butt and take that measurement down. So then you take the waist divided by hip, there's your ratio. And then what do you do with that number? You're low risk if you are less than or equal to 0.8, moderate risk from 0.81 to 0.85, and high risk for 0.86 or higher. And by risk, I mean health risk. So again, I mentioned those earlier. Your chance of disease in cases of or potential for disease as heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, mental, cognitive issues, and then cancer. So easy one to have somebody help you do at home. So what are some effective strategies for fat loss? Surgery? Well, maybe. People can go and have liposuction or other medical procedures to remove fat and fat cells. However, that doesn't really teach you anything, and you're not potentially going to receive the health benefits like lowering your blood pressure or your blood sugar. Your fat will tend to shift from one area to the other. When I learned about that, I used to joke around, oh, if I get liposuction, I'll have a big pad of fat right here on my forehead. Certainly wouldn't go to my chest. Not that I even care about that anymore, but that's exactly what happens. The fat can shift from one area to another. Fat cells never decrease in number. They are actually set in childhood and adolescence, and they shrink or expand depending on your habits. So if you're eating well and you're moving, those fat cells can tend to shrink. If you're lifting, the muscle will just take that fat right over, and you'll feel so much better. So how do you reduce fat? It's going to involve reducing overall body fat, not spot reducing, through a combination of cardiovascular exercise, strength and HIIT training, balanced diet, sleep hygiene, stress management. I didn't put it on there, but potentially HRT, MRT, whatever you want to call it. So talk about exercise for women in peri and menopause. You want to focus on high intensity interval training. When I say high intensity interval training, it's going to be an activity that you might be doing for 30 seconds or less, and you might be doing 8 rounds of that or 4 rounds of that, but it's exhausting. I'm thinking specifically the Airdyne bikes. They're really brutal. You're using your upper and your lower body, and it's hard to do up to 30 seconds. So that type of activity, you're not going to be able to do more than likely an entire 30-second intense workout like that for 45 minutes to an hour. I like to put these things in at the end of my workouts. So it's going to be short bursts of speed, intensity, whatever, that are going to last like 30 seconds or less. Obviously, strength training, most efficient way, in my opinion, is doing full body. But if you don't have a lot of time to dedicate at once, doing split days will work as well. So you might want to do 4 or 5 days where you're really focusing on certain areas of the body versus doing full body every time. Walking, and then just little caveat, just remember that exercise is a form of stress. So make sure you're using your time wisely, and also make sure you're focusing on recovery. Super important for muscle building. Balanced nutrition. This is pretty obvious. Healthy, nutrient-dense foods, lean proteins, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, healthy fats, all healthy diets say to avoid processed foods, sugary drinks. Try not to get your calories from liquids and excessive refined carbohydrates. And obviously you want to pick a plan that you can continue. So things may shift a little bit, but you want to be able to have a solid nutrition plan that you can fall back on. Your body composition. This is kind of what your body composition is affected by. So we want to make sure that we're eating less calories than we're burning. So calories in versus calories out. There's 4 ways to burn calories: through exercise, through just movement throughout your day, the thermic effect of eating, and what's the last one? Oh, your basal metabolic rate. So you're just laying in bed, you're sleeping. How many calories are you burning just based on doing absolutely nothing? So those are the 4 ways that you would burn calories. And then we look at macronutrients. If you want to dial down even further, you can attribute 30% of your body composition to what are you putting in your body, protein, carbohydrate, and fat-wise. Micronutrients are going to be your vitamins, your minerals, your fiber, things like that. That contributes about 10%. And then your meal timing and supplements are going to account for about 5% each. So that'll kind of give you an idea of holistically how you can really alter your body composition. Obviously, consistency and patience, especially as we're getting older, right? It is really, really hard to maintain low body fat as we are aging. And for the reasons that I mentioned, many of us actually are moving less, right? We become a little bit more sedentary as we're aging. Our hormones are changing for sure. We've got much more added stress. It could be, we're at the top or the highlight of our career and there's a lot of work stress. It could be aging parents. It could be becoming an empty nester. It could be you lost your best friend. Or your spouse has decided that they want a divorce, whatever. All of those stressors are happening right around this time of midlife when all of the things start meeting in at one specific time. Sleep hygiene is super important. I always put that at the top of the pyramid as far as your health is concerned. So really dialing in and making sleep a priority. And if you're struggling with it, fix that first. Sure, there are going to be times when sleep is better than others, but do your best to create that routine and consistency. Again, I already mentioned stress, consistent nutrition as well. Have your go-to plan. It's okay to make sure that you're having balance, you have a birthday, a vacation, whatever. But make sure that you have a way to kind of like a way of living when it comes to your nutrition and focus more so on the healthfulness of it and your body versus really being concerned about having that six-pack abs. And patience, right? That's super key. Fat loss takes time if you're doing it the right way. And you want to focus on those long-term health and fitness goals rather than quick fixes. Makes sense, right? That is all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if you guys have any questions, you can type them in the comments. You can take yourself off mute if you like and ask. Oh, it's super hot up in this office. Any questions? You guys never have questions. Never say never. Sometimes. All right. Okay, here's one. Does your basal metabolic rate change as you become more fit or gain muscle? Short answer, it could. The numbers would say that that would be the case. Would it be super significant? Maybe 100 or 2 calories, I'd say at most. So yeah, your basal metabolic rate is basically a formula that is calculated based on your age, your height, your weight, and whether you're male and female. It does not take into account activity level at all. So great question. Thanks for asking that. If there has been a significant amount of weight lost, your basal metabolic rate may have more of a tendency to have a swing, but generally I would say not more than 100 or 200 calories. Great question. Anything else? Just see if there's any questions out in Facebook land. Just see if there's any questions. All right. Stop the